Good evening, everyone. Thanks very much for joining us. Marijuana as medicine. Voters approved it last November, and for just as long, state government has been wrestling with implementing the program. Our purpose here tonight is not to re-argue the merits or the liabilities, clinical, legal, social, political, but to provide a status report, an update on a matter that is still hardly without controversy. How and by whom will marijuana be prescribed? For whom? And where obtained? And who can grow it and how much? At what cost and with what assurances of appropriate content and strength will the consumer have? And overseen by who or what? We should emphasize not every facet of the medical marijuana program has been hammered down. This is, again, a status report, but perhaps our panelists tonight can provide at least some of the answers. Robert Breck is Chief Counsel of the Arkansas Department of Health. Bud Roberts is Director of the Arkansas Alcoholic Beverage Control Department, and State Representative Doug House of North Little Rock has guided several pieces of legislation regarding medical marijuana through the General Assembly, and a great many pieces are still hanging fire. We'll get an update on that in just a second. Please call us with your questions. This is your program. Call us at 1-800-682-2386. You can email questions at paffairs@aetn.org or send us a tweet at hashtag ARASK or ARASK. We'll try it that way, guys. Gentlemen, thanks very much for coming in.
Well, thank you.
Mr. House, let's go to you first because you have been charged by the leadership with making this thing work, at least on the legislative end of things.
Yes, sir.
And you've got a number of pieces of legislation still pending.
I have two more left to file, but we have some that still have to be passed out of the House. They've made it through committee. Got some that have made it through the Senate committees, have to be passed on the Senate floor. So it's progressing. Not quite as fast as we'd like to, but everybody needs to think it through and ask questions.
Where have, legislatively speaking, where have we been and what's left to do from your standpoint?
Okay, from a lawmaker's standpoint, we began with an amendment that we did not draft. And so when we took a first look at it back actually 2 months before November in anticipation that it might pass, what will we have to do with this to make it work? And we saw some things that obviously didn't link very well with existing state government, fiscal years and language and rules and regulations that go into place. So we had to identify what had to be changed in order to get the airplane off the ground and what we could sustain as the way the voters wrote it.
And where are we now, kind of?
I think we're down to introducing maybe two more bills, enabling legislation which allows the agencies, particularly the Health Department, the Medical Marijuana Commission, and the Alcohol Beverage Control Division to do what they need to do. The more that can be done administratively, the better off we will be. If the legislature makes a mistake, it takes 2 years to fix it. If these agencies make a mistake, they can fix it overnight, literally. So that's what we're trying to do, is empower the executive to handle this program.
Well, Director Roberts, you've got your board anyway will meet next week. Am I correct?
That's right, Steve.
To start.
Yes,
go
sir.
ahead.
Our board will meet, the ABC board will meet on Tuesday of I'm sorry, not next week, but actually you're right. You're right. They are going to meet on Tuesday the 27th and 28th. I don't believe that's next week. I think
that's a week from Monday or Tuesday.
Yes, sir.
Right.
Yes, sir. But they'll be meeting on those 2 days starting at 9 o'clock.
We don't mean to be hazy here. I mean, no pun intended.
Oh, this all starts to blend together after a while if you look at it long enough.
Right.
But the ABC is expected to have reviewed some draft rules put together by my staff and myself to carry out their oversight obligations mandated by the amendment, and they should have plenty of time, I believe the board members will, to consider the drafts and to have a healthy discussion, perhaps some debate, and then land on certain rules and different ways that they want to go. Unlike the Medical Marijuana Commission, who has acted religiously and met for long periods of time and thought very fluidly and debated every aspect of licensing marijuana facilities. The ABC will have the function of oversight of those facilities, and what the ABC has going for it, I believe, is that it's a body that's been in place for decades, and they are well accustomed to making rules and doing so quickly, as Representative House has said.
Well, you have ABC is set up with administrative administrative and then enforcement.
Yes, sir.
How's the burden on this going to fall? Is it a 50-50 proposition, or how?
That's probably a fair assessment, at least from this early stage looking in. I don't believe that the ABC will have a whole lot to do in terms of overseeing and investigating, inspecting, and perhaps disciplining for violations the dispensaries or the cultivation facilities until perhaps a year from now or so, when the industry is really up and running.
All right. Counselor, what function, or as things stand now, anyway, where's the health department in this administrative mix?
Well, our responsibilities are to get the registration cards out to the qualified patients, to the designated caregivers who would help people who might be disabled or underage, and then the labeling and testing standards. We've moved along fairly quickly. The Board of Health met on January 26th. They finalized a draft at that time. It's out for public comment at this moment. We started the public comment period on the 8th of this month. It'll go through March the 10th. At that point, we'll have a public hearing at 2 o'clock on the 10th at the Health Department at 4815 West Markham Street. And so we're moving right along. Assuming that we don't have to make any changes that are substantive, we think we'll have ours in place by May the 1st, which would make the 180-day deadline.
So it's anticipated, or I may be stating the obvious here, that the Health Department's function will be solely to address the clinical aspect of cannabis.
That's true. I mean, the labeling and testing standards kind of meld in more with the commission because the dispensaries will have to cooperate with those aspects of it. But our main function is going to be registering those qualified patients.
I want to go back to Mr. House for just a second, but if I can follow up a question with you.
Yes, sir.
What sort of additional financial burden is this likely to impose on ABC, either regulatory or enforcement?
The combined impact that has been calculated by those in the DFA responsible for calculating such things appears to run in the neighborhood of $800,000 for ABC enforcement and ABC administration combined. That's, I believe, a conservative estimate.
Conservative?
Yes, sir, I believe so.
Okay, back to Mr. House. The body of laws that we have enacted thus far, or that perhaps you anticipate at the end of the session having enacted like that. Let's start with who can get it. How do you get it if the patient believes he or she is eligible?
Well, in the amendment, there were certain specified conditions that if you meet one of them, and let's use a couple of the obvious ones, Lou Gehrig's disease is one type of disease, or cancer. And those diseases or those conditions are chronic, and they're listed in the amendment itself. If you have one of those, if you've been certified or got a letter from a doctor that say that you have one of those conditions, then you qualify for qualify to obtain a card from the health department. There is a process by which additional illnesses, ailments, conditions can be added, and that's specified somewhat in the amendment as well.
All right. Can any physician now so certify a patient as?
Arkansas physician. An Arkansas licensed physician has to certify that the patient has the condition. We changed one thing. The amendment called for the physician to discuss the pros and cons, the benefits versus potential harm. The feedback we got from the physicians immediately was, we don't have any national or medical standards that we can apply for these conditions. They do not exist. How can we put ourselves at risk by discussing these things when there is no body of knowledge readily available to the medical community? So we saw that as a potential roadblock before this thing could get off the ground. So we asked the General Assembly to repeal that provision. They did. At the same time, we also extended the time 60 days in order to comply with all the regulatory requirements. So those two bills have been done.
Yeah, well, in fact, as one of your legislative colleagues pointed out in legislation that was not successful, it's still an illegal drug at the federal level. Does this not cast something of a shadow? Particularly, I don't think you've heard anything from the Trump administration, from DEA or from the Justice Department regarding the posture of the new presidential administration on enforcing anything related to marijuana. It may seem unlikely, but is there still not, gentlemen, kind of a shadow over the entire enterprise or undertaking? Let me put it that way.
No, I don't think so. The voters made it clear what they wanted us to do, and a majority of the voters that went to the polls told us to do it. Now, we count on them to support us as we implement their program. There's two memos that were issued by the Department of Justice. They're called the COLE, C-O-L-E memorandums. And basically they say if the state is regulating this product, we will not try to enforce federal law in your state. And that's the way we're going. We're relying upon the representations of the Department of Justice that we're doing everything correctly.
Now, in terms of dispensing, let me go to the retail aspect of it. Who's going to do that?
The Medical Marijuana Commission.
Yeah.
There's actually not somebody here tonight representing the Medical Marijuana Commission. I believe that they are mostly that commission is mostly comprised of physicians, some of whom are actually doing surgery right now and couldn't make it to the show. But that commission will be licensing the dispensaries and of course the grow houses.
Yeah. Well, what criteria do we have on well, let's start with the cultivation. Are they one and the same, cultivators and dispensaries? What did we decide on that?
No, not really. Cultivation is one extreme of the process. The dispensaries is the other end of the extreme. In between those two extremes are several stop points. Now, the cultivator, they can grow as much as they want. Usually the consensus of opinion is going to be indoor grow. There'll be specifications about facilities, videotaping, security, documentation, purity, testing, and all of those sort of things, those kind of criteria that will be handed out by the health department and by the Alcohol Beverage Control Division, as well as the Marijuana Commission. The dispensaries will then sell, in short form, the cultivators will then sell to the dispensaries, who may then retail it out to people with the marijuana card. Now, we have provided for a couple of intermediate steps, which every commodity in the American economy recognizes, and we'll just use rice or soybeans. It doesn't go straight from the farmer to the kitchen. There are processors, there are distributors, there are transportation points along that way to get the product from farm to kitchen. It's going to be the same way with this. So we have made allowances that the Marijuana Commission, Medical Marijuana Commission, may in fact license processors, transportation people, and distributing people. So that may happen. All of these will be regulated all along the way. Everybody that touches the product or has access to the product will be background checked. Make sure that we don't have people that have some criminal problems, because this is high dollar stuff.
At what point does in terms of determining who is going to cultivate and who is going to dispense?
That's really up to the Marijuana Commission.
The commission.
They would license the cultivation facilities and the dispensaries.
Right.
They have decided that they want to first license 5 cultivation facilities and 32 out of 40 available dispensaries. Now, they're still a little bit wrestling with some of the selection processes for both of those, and that's still a work in progress. They do know that they're going to have certain minimums. There's going to have to be financial, business, ability, I'm talking about agricultural ability to grow the product. So they've got a lot of criteria as far as to meeting the baseline. Now the final selection, whether it'll be at random or on merit or anything like that, we don't really know yet.
That's going to be the commission's thing. All right, questions from viewers. And again, we would emphasize that this is your program and we want your questions. 1-800-662-2386, a toll-free call. Email questions at paffairs@aetn.org or a tweet at AETN, #ARAsk. Will card-carrying patients be protected from a drug test on the job? If so, how? If not, why not?
Well, it's really not under the health department and probably not under the commission either. But the amendment does state that an employer cannot discriminate against a person who's lawfully using marijuana under the amendment. It doesn't allow them to use it at work or be impaired at work, but it is pretty clear under the current law that they would be protected as using any type of other medicine. And the Representative House may have a bill that addresses some of that.
There is another bill that has been introduced and is working its way through the General Assembly. It's introduced by our State Representative Carlton Wing of North Little Rock, and it provides a lot of detailed guidance to employers. And what Counselor has just mentioned, that's a good overview. We want workplace safety. That's one of our primary goals. We don't want a worker impaired. We don't want an automobile operator or heavy equipment operator impaired. And so employers will basically be treating medical marijuana the same they would any prescription drug that could cause an impairment in a safety-sensitive position or a position where somebody could get hurt. Worker safety is our primary focus, and his bill takes care of that and gives some good guidance about what employers can, can't do, should, and shouldn't do.
A caller or a viewer wants to know, has heard that the ABC office will enforce the regulations if someone wants to apply to open a dispensary or presumably a cultivation site. What is the application process? When does it start?
Again, the Medical Marijuana Commission, they are in charge of promulgating, creating, and putting on the law books their regulations for how to achieve a license and how to receive an application. So far, no forms have yet been created called an application form by the Medical Marijuana Commission. I anticipate that, this coming Tuesday at 3:30 at 1515 West 7th Street on the 5th floor, there will be a Medical Marijuana Commission meeting, and from what I understand from my staff, my legal staff, the commission is expected to receive a motion from within their body to fully and finally adopt a set of requirements, which should include rules that provide specifically for the applications this caller is calling about. It's a very good question. We just don't yet know the complete answer.
Another viewer question, will different strengths of marijuana be available in pharmaceutical form, prescription form?
I would assume they would. Part of the testing standards are they will have to have what the potency or the THC levels of that particular product is. And so one of the questions is going to be is how is this actually, how's it going to be recommended that they take it? That's one of the things we're going to struggle with because, again, there aren't FDA guidelines on what the proper dosage might be. But the labeling will require it to indicate what the THC level is.
In what form is it?
Well,
Mr. House, go ahead.
there are any number of forms. There are about 400 different varieties of cannabis, and each one of those varieties have different characteristics. Some, and I'll just use two for comparison, tetrahydrocannabidiol, I think I've got it, THC. That's the one everybody knows about. There's another one called BCD. Help me out here.
Cannabidiol.
Cannabidiol, yeah.
CBD?
CBD. The acronyms get flowing. But anyway, one is a hallucinogenic. The other one is an oil that has a lot of important medical qualities. But what they found out, or what research has told, and that's been conducted in places like Canada and Israel, is that different mixtures of those two compounds and others are useful for treating various ailments. Is it FDA approved? No, but there are a lot of people throughout the world that are using these different kinds of variations of the product in different forms: smokable, drinkable, drops, salves, creams, inhalants, you name it.
Tablets.
Tablets, candy. Now, let me emphasize that right there. That's one of the important pieces of legislation that's pending in the Senate right now, is that the commission, the ABC Commission, has the authority to regulate the attractive nuisance aspect. We don't want it in the hands of kids. So if they say no candy, that's what they're talking. We'll use a brand name, no gummy bears. That also means gummy worms or whatever. They have the authority to regulate, make sure that it's in child-proof containers, just like any other medicine. So these are important things that we have to consider. This is medicine that needs to be treated like medicine.
Well, there are also some restrictions, or at least the capacity to restrict, or am I wrong?
That's correct.
On marketing the product. Advertising, promotion, marketing.
I believe one of the bills that's been filed would not allow it to be marketed toward children. Also in the Board of Health rules, in their draft, you cannot have labeling that would be attractive to minors as well. So there are going to be efforts to try not to market it toward minors.
So in a flyer that comes in the mail, there wouldn't be, along with aspirin and ibuprofen and whatever.
Yeah. It's somewhat of a delicate balance. The First Amendment to our Constitution says
that was what I was getting at, I guess.
You can't ban all commercial speech. You have to be able to say, we have a product, it's available, and this is where it's available. That's you have to allow at least that much. Now, you don't have to have flying unicorns with, diamonds squirting out their ears that on the television to bring in kids to buy this product. That can be regulated, and that's what we're driving at. We don't want anything that's an attractive nuisance to children, and the commissions will have the authority to regulate that.
A viewer in Carroll County wonders if anything in the statutes, or the amendment for that matter, would preclude a city or a local government, city or county government, from applying for a licensure so as to perhaps raise money for that local government entity.
No, not at all.
So in this case, Carroll County could apply for
they certainly
a dispensary permit.
Yeah, and the your local college, there's been some effort and said, well, maybe the prisons ought to grow it. And we kind of thought that was not a good idea.
Yeah.
And some of the schools, the 4-year and the 2-year agri colleges, said, hey, knock yourself out. If you can produce an income, that's fine. But we really didn't want them competing with the free market. So
compared to, well, I won't compare it to soybeans, but on a per pound basis, because this is serious stuff.
Sure.
What medical conditions are they specified in law, or will the health department subtract to that list?
Well, there are some specific conditions.
Mr. House mentioned some.
Yeah, in the law. HIV, cancer, hepatitis C. There are several, and if you want to look at our draft rules, you can get them at www.healthy.arkansas.gov. Page 4 of those rules, at the top, you can see all those conditions. The amendment also allows the State Board of Health to add conditions by rule, and so there's a process that's also laid out in the rule for that. And what will have to happen, somebody will have to bring evidence to the director of the health department. They'll have 120 days to decide whether or not there's enough evidence that it should be added. Once that time period runs, then we can decide whether or not to pursue rule-making changes. So there's a process to add more.
Well, does the commission have that same power, Mr. Roberts? Because it's comprised of clinicians or anyone,
yeah. Well,
physicians and pharmacists.
Yes, sir. The ABC and the Department of Health will, of course, keep in very close contact and make sure that we don't work crossways with respect to the conditions. We will defer in large part to the Department of Health, whose board is comprised of physicians as well, whereas the ABC's board members are not necessarily physicians, and we don't have any physicians on the ABC board right now. But if I'm...
Well, I meant the Medical Marijuana Commission itself, as opposed to the board, yeah.
That's solely under the amendment. That's going to be a sole thing for the Board of Health to handle. So they'll have to come to the department with the evidence of a a condition that warrants having that added, they'll have to go through that process, and it'll end up being a decision of the State Board of Health.
So there's no potential there for two competing boards arguing over a particular.
Don't think so. Not as far as qualifying conditions. I think that there'll be, and they're pretty broad categories right now. Chronic pain, post-traumatic stress. They call it disorder. We just call it condition now in the veterans community. These are cannabis is used in many areas where it's legal and recommended, not necessarily on paper, but recommended by a lot of the VA treatment people. That's really good for post-traumatic stress.
Steve, some of the
please,
if I may, some of the conditions specified in the amendment are, as these gentlemen have indicated, cancer, glaucoma, positive HIV, positive AIDS, hepatitis C, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, Tourette's syndrome, Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, post-traumatic stress disorder, severe arthritis, fibromyalgia, Alzheimer's disease is the list contained in the amendment. And of course, it has sort of a catch-all, a catch-all condition that anything that causes intractable pain, anything that causes intractable nausea and the sort, those can also be qualifying conditions so far.
Mr. Bray.
There will be new conditions at least brought forth to the health department. I've already been approached with people who want to add conditions. There's just not a process to do that at this time. Once this rule goes into place, we'll have that process. But I have no doubt that people will come forth with new conditions.
Is there a mechanism, or is one needed? Mr. Breck, I'm wondering, or anyone, has there been feedback from the medical community, from the physicians themselves, that I don't want this authority, I will not prescribe it, I don't? Is a physician compelled?
No, I don't think they would be compelled. Actually, one of the physicians on the Medical Marijuana Commission, Dr. Ramon and myself, we actually went and met with the State Medical Board and discussed some of these issues. I don't think any doctor would be compelled to do it. You know, it'll be up to them whether they want to prescribe it. It's not really a prescription, but whether they want to do that written certification. So
there is an interesting involvement by the medical community. A lot of people call me and ask me what's going on, I guess, to put it bluntly. And I've had some feedback from a number of organizations that are planning to get into the growing and the dispensing, and they have physicians as part of their board of directors of their organizations. A couple of organizations that I have talked to really want to get into some serious research on some of the medical conditions that could be available. But no physician, there are some restrictions. A physician can't write letters and own part of the dispensary, but they can certainly participate in recreating a lot of the research that's been done, for instance, in Israel and Canada, that's pretty extensive.
Several questions here from viewers tonight on who or what is this restricted to individuals, or can corporations, can one incorporate? Can a corporation, PLLC, for example, get in on the action, frankly?
The amendments talk about that, and we've provided some legislation. Any kind of business organization can own the facility, the land and the buildings and the equipment on that building. And the licenses will be issued by the Medical Marijuana Commission to operate that facility at that location. Now, when the license is issued, it will be issued in the name of a person. And that person may be the president of a company, or the chief operating officer, or the senior partner, or the sole proprietor, as the case may be, because we want to know who to come to if there's a problem. Now, those people can come and go. Person can say, I'm quitting, I'm getting out of the business, and there'll need to be a transition to another operator, but they all have to be approved by the Medical Marijuana Commission. Business organization, as far as owning the facilities, is irrelevant to the state, but who's actually operating it on the ground is very relevant to the state.
Anyone want to add to that?
No, that was perfect.
That's right. Do we anticipate yet what the fees will be, or I'll add to that, the capital requirements, for example, for a dispensary, for a cultivator, particularly for a dispensary?
I've got that here. Just a moment, please, sir.
if you want to go ahead.
While Bud's looking for that,
Yeah,
I can
Robert,
tell you that the fees, as far as getting registration cards from the health department, whether or not you're a qualifying patient or a designated caregiver, that the fee that we're going to start out with is $50 for that particular card, and that's for a one-year card at this point. And it's really a guessing game of guessing how many people are actually going to register. We think that will be enough to run for the first year, and then we'll have to adjust. All the money that's raised by this will have to be spent on the program. But we're going to start with a $50 fee, and then we'll go up or down from there once everything settles down.
How much can a patient obtain, and how often?
And that'll be tracked
How's that
actually
capped?
by the health department. They can get 2.5 ounces of usable marijuana every 2 weeks. And so what will have to happen, the dispensary will report how much is sold to each qualifying patient or caregiver, and that'll be tracked by the health department to make sure that they don't go over those caps. But currently it would be 2.5 ounces of usable marijuana for every 2 weeks.
Do we have any information or estimates anyway, based on other states or from wherever, about pricing?
Yes. If you want to know about annual sales, once it gets up and running, the estimates range from a low of around 20 million in sales annually to a high of 80 million sales annually up and running. We're talking about 3 or 4 years into the program. As far as pricing of product, the product's going to have to be priced in competition with the fully functioning illegal market that exists right out here on the street. That market is up and running. You can buy an ounce of marijuana today for about $250 to $300 an ounce, and that's medical grade, real clean marijuana without impurities in it. That's the going price on the street today. So the price of the product, in order to be competitive, is going to have to get down around that price range at the dispensary level. Otherwise, people are going to turn to the illegal stuff. Think of the liquor business. You can still buy moonshine whiskey if you want to, but it's not very smart because you might kill yourself. We want to be able to provide a good product to those people who believe they need it at a reasonable price that they're glad to pay.
Will the consumer have to go to the dispensary to obtain?
Either the qualifying patient will have to go there or the designated caregiver. And the designated caregivers are for those, for minors or those disabled individuals who may not be able to get there. And so in those cases, the designated caregiver, who also has to be registered with the health department, they would be able to pick that up for them. As
a prescribed, legal at least under state law, pharmaceutical, what are the insurance company implications for will my insurance coverage take care of this?
Well, let me say that the doctors won't want you to say prescribe because they cannot prescribe it because under federal law it's a Schedule I, and so they cannot prescribe this. What they'll be doing is doing a written certification saying they have one of the conditions that will allow that person to go to the dispensary to pick it up. So a subtlety, but still the doctors do not like to talk about prescribing it.
And maybe the essence of the question, what kind do you get, how much? There are a lot of people from the internet to local operators that have opinions. This is essentially a homeopathic remedy like echinacea or dandelion tea. And so you'll have a lot of people that have opinions about how much, what kind, in what way, how often, and all that sort of thing. Those people are out there, and they're on the internet. And so you get a lot of opinions about how different conditions ought to be treated. But there's not a medically established standard any more than there is for, say, a black root.
A couple of viewers have observed that obviously you have had to do a great deal of homework in research.
I've learned a lot more than I ever wanted to, yes.
Well, you've learned it, and several are asking, once it's up and running, in every aspect, does this mirror the system that's used in California, also Colorado, or other states which have licensed? How close?
Well, I can tell you what we did at the health department. We used the certification requirements. We basically took those right out of the amendment. As far as the labeling and testing standards, we did steal those from the state of Oregon for the most part. There was no reason to reinvent the wheel. And so a lot of those, if you looked at ours, it will look very familiar to Oregon's.
Will there be any restrictions on obtaining medical marijuana if one is a convicted felon, the patient?
No.
I don't know of any, no.
Why hasn't someone been brought in from a state with a medical program in order to assist Arkansas in getting this thing going?
They've been here by the hundreds. Everybody wanting to implement their own version so they can get an advantage. We listen to them all. We pick out what works for Arkansas. They have been here, I promise.
Is there any liability? Would liability accrue to a physician, this is from Phillips County, who prescribed marijuana and it had profound adverse effects on a patient who was perhaps...
I couldn't answer that. They can't, a physician cannot prescribe. Well, I guess they could, but they may very well lose their DEA license, so I don't think they may suggest, but that's between them and their patient.
Steve, I believe all the physician is doing is stating that a patient has or does not have a qualifying condition. And I believe that's all the physician is doing by and large.
So it is not a prescription per se at all, merely a certification that the individual is...
And if that physician has a relationship with that patient, let me talk about my own experience. My personal physician, he says to me, Doug, if you're dying of cancer, I don't care what you smoke or what you use if it helps you. Now that's the kind of relationship I have with my physician. I would hope that everybody would have that type of relationship. But if you just go get a letter from somebody who says, yep, you've got that condition according to your examination or your medical records, I wouldn't expect that conversation to occur.
From Benton County, a viewer wants to know if all the trains run on time and the administrative procedures are put in place, when would we anticipate, what's realistic in terms of putting the system in place and getting it functioning?
Well, I think the system will be in place, but the way the amendment reads, the marijuana has to be grown here in Arkansas. So what's going to have to happen before any marijuana is actually out there for sale is they're going to have to, these cultivation centers or the dispensaries are going to have to be licensed by the commission. They'll have to go through inspections, they'll have to get up and running, and then they'll have to grow it. And so the projections are there won't be any marijuana available until early next year. So, yep.
Does anyone have an idea how fast this stuff grows? I confess I don't.
4 months, I believe, from seed to mature plant. That's what I've been told.
Yeah, 3 to 4 months. You'll hear different urban legends. You can, yes, it is possible with the right lights, the water, fertilizer, etc., to grow a 20 by 20 by 20 foot tall, 20 foot wide, 20 foot long plant. But you run a risk of having that plant develop mold or mildew or pests, and then it has to be destroyed. So the better way, the cultivators that have talked to me about it, is to grow plants 4 and 5 foot, and you get 3, 4, and 5 harvests off of that. You will actually gain more product by growing smaller plants, destroying it, and regrowing than you would trying to grow one great big one.
A viewer wants to know is, obviously, if insurance won't cover cannabis or any of its variations, will the state furnish subsidies for the low income who might not be able to obtain, but who get certified?
Hard to speculate on that.
We're not there yet.
It's a good question. Very good question.
A number of, and there are a lot of good people that believe in the medicinal qualities of cannabis. And they have suggested to us on several occasions that there be an outlet for those that just can't afford it. We don't have any to give out yet, so we're going to have to kind of get on down the road before we can get to that point.
We've already addressed the price of a license, I think.
I found
the commission hasn't addressed it specifically.
The commission has not finalized it, yeah. But if all goes according to the rule drafts, for a cultivation facility, for instance, the price for the application, just to file the application, is $15,000, $7,500 of which will be returned if the application is unsuccessful, followed by, and this is the big part, an annual licensing fee of $100,000 and a performance bond of $500,000. So it's going to be a pricey endeavor for anybody who wishes to grow them.
Oh, so will the return. Am I correct? I assume the return will be adequate as well.
Some places, Maine, for instance, had a lot of big name brand corporations, big corporations, enter into it, and they went home with their tail between their legs. They couldn't make a go of it. Other places, Connecticut is one of my models to look at. They've had a very successful medicinal marijuana program where everybody makes a decent profit, but more importantly, provides a service, the product, to the people that need it.
Will the state audit, or another way, monitor the books of dispensaries?
ABC will be in charge of assuring that the providers of medical marijuana and the growers of medical marijuana keep certain records on hand for inspection for a period of 3 years. So yes, sir, we've been vested with that responsibility.
Does anything about the medical marijuana undertaking in any way alter state penalties for non-certified possession and use? Does this affect the criminal code at all?
No, not at all.
Can a glaucoma patient be eligible for certification?
Yes, it is one of the conditions listed in the amendment. So.
A caveat on glaucoma that people really ought to know. There are some kind of glaucomas, the 4 ophthalmologists I've heard from tell me there are some kinds of glaucoma that cannabis can be detrimental to the condition, and some it can help. Check with your eye doctor. You don't want to home remedy your eyes. Make sure that you know what you're doing. And I really would tell people, don't go get it just for glaucoma.
It was said that, or earlier I believe, that no convicted felons need apply. In other words, was that through the entire chain of cultivation, refinement, marketing?
We are waiting for the Senate to pass the law. The original amendment called it, how did it style it, violent felony?
Excluded felonies. It included, correct, violent felonies and drug felonies. That's right.
And we proposed a bill, and hopefully it'll get passed through the Senate next day or two, that just says felonies. That's what everybody knows. And if you've got a sad story, circumstance or whatever, go tell it to the judge, get your records sealed, or go tell it to the governor and get your pardon, and then the commissions can work with you. But don't ask the commissions to make those kinds of judgments. They're not going to be in the business of granting pardons and sealing records. That's for the judiciary.
A concealed carry permit owner wants to know if he or she can be prescribed medical marijuana. Is it even addressed in the...
Well, the one thing that does it is in the amendment that it says that you cannot be denied a license of any type in Arkansas if you are a medical marijuana patient. So I would suspect that they might be able to, but I have heard that in some states you cannot buy a weapon because you can't get an ATF background check if you're a medical marijuana.
There is a federal law, and it's actually, you can see it when you go buy a pistol or buy a weapon at a gun store, and they make you fill out that chart, and it says in there in black, bold print, if you're using an illegal substance under federal law, you may not possess a weapon. And that's on the new alcohol, tobacco, firearm forms that were issued effective January 1st of this year. So if it's still an illegal substance under federal law, you may not use an illegal substance and possess a firearm under federal law. Arkansas law doesn't address that subject.
If someone has a prescription for medical marijuana and has an automobile accident, for example, does the law in any way affect comparative fault, for example, on that?
That's
tort liabilities?
That'll be one of those things we'll have to see how that works out.
If you're under the influence, you don't need to be behind a wheel, period. Yeah, that's just good advice. Of anything, prescription or otherwise, it's still driving while impaired.
From Pulaski, Mr. Roberts, specifically, do you anticipate having to hire more agents, either regulatory or enforcement?
Yes, sir. We expect ABC enforcement will need at least another 6 agents for the task of oversight medical marijuana facilities.
And you've already said, I think it's almost 800,000 is what you anticipate. The agency anticipates.
That's combined with my agency. I actually should say this: the ABC administration and the ABC enforcement agency are 2 separate agencies, but we operate together and call ourselves collectively the division. That $800,000 figure was for a combination of both agencies within the division.
Why the $1 million, quote, $1 million buy-in rule to grow medical marijuana?
I'm afraid we'd have to have a commissioner address that question. I don't believe, I mean, they debated it quite a bit. I believe that the proponents for the hefty buy-in fees wanted to make sure, and I'm paraphrasing them here, they wanted to make sure they were getting the best possible applicants, and there was some correlation they felt between a successful business person or somebody that could show that sort of financial backing and the ability to get going a successful farm, marijuana grow house or dispensary. That's my recollection of the.
Is that a performance bond? Do you remember? $1 million performance bond?
Yes, I believe that's correct.
Yeah, we're going to grant one of 5 limited licenses. If they're not going to produce the product, the public's going to be damaged. This is what the people asked for, and we have an obligation to provide. So if somebody gets a license and they're not going to turn the product out the way they're supposed to, then they owe the state some money. That's why the performance bond.
From Nevada County, who and how often will these cultivator or will the product itself be tested at what stage? And who's responsible for certifying that it's not full of whatever?
Well, the testing standards are in the Board of Health's rules. It'll have to be tested before it's sold at the dispensary level at least. And so if it's not tested by the cultivator, once it's transferred to the dispensary, it'll have to be tested then. But it'll definitely have to be tested. Each batch will have to be tested before it's sold to the public. And there are standards for pesticides, for heavy metals, there's some very, very strong standards, and also for mold and things like that as well.
Does this, and this is sort of a political question, I guess, in the bipartisan sense of the term, will this increase any pressure, Mr. House, let's go to you on this increase any pressure at all on the Arkansas General Assembly to take a different attitude toward non-prescriptive, non-clinical marijuana?
We're talking about recreational.
Recreation, yes.
Okay. No, I think it won't, because here's what we know.
The feds, but yeah.
The election told us that 54% of the people want medical marijuana. Polling data shows us that 70% of Arkansans do not want recreational marijuana. If we give the people what they have told us they wanted, which is medical, then I'm counting on that other 70% of those people of saying, no, we're not going to have recreational, we don't want that. So I think it is politically important for us to do what the people said, rather than the people to say, well, that arrogant bunch of so-and-sos, and then decriminalize the whole process. And I'm facing that. That's one of my realities. Yes, sir.
Well, from Washington County, and I'll read this one. Since there's no contiguous state with a legal system for cultivation facilities, since acquisitions would immediately put both transferring and Arkansas cultivation facilities in violation of one of the enforcement priorities mentioned in the Cole memorandum. Well, I've lost the question in here. We can't have the chicken without the egg. I guess what we're looking for,
assumes we're going to sell across state lines.
Yeah, exactly.
And we cannot do that under the amendment. The only thing that can be sold under the amendment are seeds. Those seeds will then, will grow into the plants that are eventually sold. I think that's why there's going to be a time lag before any marijuana is actually for sale. But it's clear under the amendment and under federal law, you cannot transport the marijuana, usable marijuana across state lines.
I'm assured by my sources that the seeds are already here and have been here for several decades.
Well, I can't help but notice that a lot of these questions are coming from Northwest Arkansas, but we'll let that go.
Well, maybe they don't get out much. I don't know.
Well, I mean, well, here's one from South Ark, from Columbia County. Are there any efforts to lift the prohibition totally, anyway, on cultivation? And I guess that's we just kind of went over.
Yeah, I don't support that, and I don't think the people do either.
What about a lottery approach? Or you might have several rival organizations or LLCs with adequate capital and clean records and all that. How then?
Well, Robert and I have sat through, I would say, all or almost all of the Medical Marijuana Commission's meetings, and so I'm not trying to speak for the commission, but I can tell you that they appear to be leaning toward the direction of the following. For cultivation facilities, they're looking at a strict merit system, no lottery. For the dispensaries, however, of which the commission seems in favor of allowing 32 of those licenses, they do anticipate there being a lottery for each of the districts that have more than enough applications to yield 4, let me say this right, 4 dispensaries, no more than 4 dispensaries per county.
There's been legislation on this. What about this is going to kick off to the state some nice, or some revenues in terms of taxes and fees and whatever. Where, Mr. House, is that earmarked?
I don't think that we'll break even until about 3 years out. Once I mean, we're talking about 3 years from November, from the time the people passed it. I think it'll start breaking even about that point and then generate some revenues. But it's not going to be the cash cow that Colorado's seen because it's not recreational. I think it'll support itself plus a little.
So it's the clinical only application of this that's likely to hold down revenues.
Yeah, and I might share this. We are looking at probably an ad valorem tax at each sale, probably a 4%. Can release that. It'll probably be filed tomorrow. That's up to the will of the legislature, of course. But anywhere from 20 to 80 million in sales, you can figure up what the revenues might be, less the cost of administration. But we're talking about years and years out from now.
Is there an age limit, minimum age limit for a physician to certify a patient?
No, but if the patient's under 18 years of age, their parent would have to sign up and be registered as a designated caregiver. And so there's not a minimum age. It will be up to the physician, I suppose, to whether or not they want to write that certification for that particular patient.
And we have mentioned that degenerative spinal diseases are covered?
If it causes chronic pain, I think it would probably be covered.
Okay. What is required to amend Article 6 to allow people to grow their own marijuana? New amendment, I guess.
There are...
Well, and even that wouldn't...
I suppose it's possible for a representative house and the legislature to allow that, but I don't see that happening anytime soon.
I don't think it's going to ever happen. You could do it with a majority vote of the legislature, just abolish all the criminal penalties, then you only face the federal wrath, not the state wrath. It's not going to happen.
Right. And then you would be at the sufferance of the federal government's whim on any particular day, whether it wished to enforce.
The federal revenuers would be combing the hills. They sure would.
Balanced budget. ABC, what agency will actually collect the taxes and fees, supervise that? DFNA or?
Well, I can tell you as far as the registration fees, that will come straight to the health department. The sales taxes that are contemplated in the amendment, I guess those would go to DFNA and they'll divide that up as law requires.
That's correct.
This is really a physician's question. Or a question that goes to a physician. Fair chance, do I have a fair chance to cultivate marijuana?
I think so.
Depends, well, lawfully, I guess.
I think so. I think so. I have tried to maintain, to be an open book. Just about everything I've said has been in the newspaper. I tell everybody the same question, and we're watching it. Matter of fact, law enforcement's watching this whole process too. It's no secret that there are organized criminal elements that would love to get into this business in this state. So we've got the right people watching over the whole process. I think it's about as fair as we can possibly get it.
Well, frankly, sir, I had not heard, and I'm slow, but I hadn't heard that there was organized or significant organized interest in this. Anybody want to take that up, Mr. House?
Well, certainly there are a lot of out-of-state people that are coming in wanting to, quote, invest. There are a lot of out-of-state people that have hired a lot of lobbyists trying to get a different advantage. I really commend our public servants in the Medical Marijuana Commission, the ABCD, and the Health Department of doing this straight up like they're supposed to and being totally transparent. There's not very many secrets that I know of. I don't know of any secrets. But there's always somebody trying to gain an edge, trying to get you to change a little rule that maybe gives them an advantage. And they're all resistant to that. And I've been watching them, and they've been watching me as well they should. But you see it going on. And So I'm glad that, and I've announced it among my peers, you know, there are law enforcement people that are watching this entire process. Let's be on the up and up and let's do it right. And I'm real proud of both of our elected officials and our public servants of how they handle this.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, Mr. Robert, I assume you're aware as well of active attempts by less than savory investors to move in on this? Can you shed more light on that?
I don't believe that I can. Nobody has approached me to enter the business and overtly identified themselves as an unsavory individual. And
nor would they.
No, sir. And nor should I presume to characterize them in that way.
Mr. House, you want to add something to what you...
I don't know how plainer I can state it.
Well, you have applications, individuals or organizations who are actively eyeing this process now.
Oh, we've got people yes, we've had,
in or out of state.
Yeah, I mean, all of us that are in the legislature have been approached by people who want to invest in it, people who have lobbyists who are representing them, who want to get into the business, and who are seeking certain advantages. And you can just, you know, you can go down there and see them working, or you can ask anybody. Now, I'm not going to be at liberty to name names on the air, but I know how I approach it. I'm not interested in any discussions about special advantages for anybody, and I don't know very many of my colleagues that are either.
Yeah, well, I know they've got lobbyists in there, but I think the clock's about to catch us here, and this is a tempting subject to follow up. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time tonight. Maybe we've brought a little light to this subject, and we, I think, are anticipating doing a second follow-up program once should I say, the smoke clears. Thanks for joining us. Thank you for your questions. See you next time.
They did exactly